Am I live or what? Let's find something to look at, eh? I'm live. Whew. Lines now contain. What the fuck? Hang on. After the line, return to. Lines escape their enclosure. What the fuck? Why would they do that?
When it comes to sun protection, you can't have enough, especially when you're protecting your exterior. Hames Paint Solar Shield is like sunscreen.
Good afternoon. There was panic at Taronga Zoo early this morning when 5 lions escaped their enclosure, sending the attraction into lockdown. Staff and overnight guests, including a group of school children, told to run for safety until the animals could be recaptured. Bill Hogan reports.
Good afternoon. Well, the pride of 5 lions are right now back in their enclosure, and an investigation into exactly how they escaped is right now underway. Zookeepers first raised the alarm around 6:30 this morning when 4 cubs and an adult were spotted outside their den, but within a 6-foot fence separating them from the rest of the zoo. The Code 1 alarm was raised and the zoo went into lockdown. Everyone on site ushered into safe zones, including campers staying at Taronga's Roar and Snore. Magnus Perry hid in the bathroom with his wife and kids for an hour.
They came running down the tent area saying that there's a Code 1, get out of your tent, leave your belongings behind, run, come with us. Everyone thought it was a drill first, but then it became obvious that it was actually real.
4 of the lions returned safely to their den. 1 cub was tranquilized but is recovering well. The pride is now resting in a back-of-house exhibit and being monitored while an investigation into how this breach occurred gets underway.
We will conduct a full review of this incident. We will also conduct a full review of the exhibit to ensure it is 100% safe and the lions won't enter that area until that's completed.
The lions were off limits to families and school groups visiting today, but Taronga Zoo is back up and running after what has been quite the morning uproar.
An emergency situation occurred this morning at Taronga Zoo, Sydney. 5 lions, 1 adult and 4 cubs were located outside of their main enclosure at 6:30 a.m. The lions were observed in a small area adjacent to the main lion exhibit, where a 6-foot fence separated them from the rest of the zoo. The zoo has very strict safety protocols in place for such an incident, and immediate action was taken. All persons on site were moved to safe zones. 4 of the lions calmly made their way back into their main exhibit and dens, and 1 lion cub was safely tranquilized. All animals are now safe in their back-of-house exhibit and are being closely monitored. All zoo staff responded and acted swiftly, and procedures and processes were followed as they should have been. As a result, the situation was under control within minutes. We have received video footage and we confirm that it was less than 10 minutes between the lions eating exhibit and the full emergency.
Shut the fuck up, man. Okay, now. Okay, I got told. No, I didn't get told. I was telling myself, kind of go deep into the manosphere stuff. So, first, was it what I can kind of gather? It's it stems from the movie The Matrix and stuff. So let's check out this guy's YouTube channel first before we click on the video. So this guy's he does film stuff mainly, but so I don't know if his take on philosophy will be film students don't have good philosophy understanding. So
Good afternoon. There was
aesthetics to a point, sure, but this guy here, okay, this channel here has good philosophy. This French guy here, really good. We're living in a matrix. Daily motivation. I'm sure the guy's intelligent, but The Matrix is a documentary, not a movie. Bruce Linton, okay. Illuminati, of course. Jonathan Page. Check it out, okay? So what I can kind of tell the modern, I'm not going to say men's rights, but the modern sort of thing that this red pill stuff is based on the, the Matrix. So hence why I'm going to go into this sort of thinking. So, I've been telling myself since I try to come a bit more serious on this YouTube shit to post twice a week, and because of the issues I'm having with having to I don't earn a lot of money from YouTube, but all my writings as well. But I am posting something. May as well do some live streaming, and I'll be probably posting another vlog this in a few days. So anyway, let's check this out. Symbols of the map. Oh, hang on. What is actual symbolism? Oh, fuck it. Hang on. Program of the nations, messages. Salutation. Okay. Metal Rising. I'll check that out. Yeah, fuck it. Why not? Let's check out this one instead. Simulation theory. So many series out there.
It's a cat. It's an old cat. It's an old cat back. Are you living in a computer simulation?
Maybe.
This was the title of the philosopher Nick Bostrom's now iconic paper.
Nick Bostrom's side note, I know he's... Get on to him, okay, guys? Seriously, get on to Nick Bostrom.
Published in 2003, Bostrom's ideas sent shockwaves through the academic world, through popular culture, and even religion. His paper suggested that more than a remote and whimsical prospect, there is a serious possibility that we and our entire reality are the simulation of an advanced civilization. Bostrom's paper proved so compelling that in 2016, a New Yorker article reported that many in Silicon Valley had become obsessed with the idea, and that 2 unnamed billionaires had secretly employed teams of scientists to attempt to break out of the simulation. Technology magnate Elon Musk has also been public about his personal fascination with this idea, including his conviction that the probability that we are living in base reality is 1 in billions. So why have prominent individuals, scientists, and philosophers taken seriously this seemingly bizarre possibility? Is it true? And what might it mean? With the use of ever more powerful and sophisticated computers, over the last 50 years, humans have created ever more realistic virtual worlds. As far as anyone can presently tell, there is nothing which stands in the way of these simulated realities continuing to improve forever. Many now foresee a time when these virtual worlds will become so realistic that unless we had direct knowledge, it may be impossible for us to tell the difference between virtual worlds and base
Cultural industry,
reality.
and neuroplasticity.
This raises the unsettling question, how do we know that we don't already live in a simulation? Could this have already happened? Could we be living in what Bostrom calls an ancestor simulation, a creation of an advanced civilization designed for the purposes of studying its own past? In truth, advanced civilizations may have countless reasons to run such simulations and would likely create astronomical numbers of them. It would therefore seem to follow that of all of the beings in existence, an overwhelming majority of them would be inhabiting simulations. The likelihood then that we occupy base reality would therefore appear very small indeed. The simulation argument. In his paper, Bostrom lays out 3 propositions of which he argues at least one must be true. Proposition 1 is that all technological civilizations collapse or go extinct prior to reaching technological maturity. Proposition 2 is that civilizations can reach technological maturity, but for some reason they never create the kind of simulations which could resemble our world. If we reject either of these 2 propositions, Bostrom argues that we must accept his third, final proposition, that we are almost certainly living in a simulation. We will explore this striking possibility as well as its far-reaching implications, but to get a better sense of its likelihood, we'll first take a closer look at the other 2 propositions. Proposition 1, the Great.
Well, the thing is too, what's that saying? History repeats itself, and I think Kierkegaard said, "You learn backwards, but you live forwards." Stuff like that. So, it's also like if you talk cultural theory as well. Like it's like one culture here, this country, another country over there. Culture here is kind of like what's learned is what's superior. If that makes sense.
Filter. The first proposition is that civilizations can never acquire technological maturity and so never get a chance to create ancestor simulations.
I want to know why he picks technology. For me, I'll probably pick intelligence, wisdom and stuff.
Initially, this suggestion seems unlikely. After all, we live in a universe of hundreds of billions of galaxies and countless trillions of star systems, one of which could be home to a burgeoning technological civilization. What then could prevent any and all civilizations from advancing to this level of technological maturity? At the outset, the idea that any and all civilizations fail to achieve technological maturity seems grossly pessimistic. So why entertain this possibility? One proposed answer is that there simply are no other intelligent civilizations in the universe.
What about the variable of human emotions?
Proponents of this view draw from the mysterious observation known as the Fermi paradox, that the universe around us seems oddly silent. Our universe has been habitable for life long before our solar system even formed. It would seem that more than enough time has elapsed in the universe for advanced intelligent civilizations to become an obvious presence in our galaxy. And yet we see no signs of burgeoning Type 3 civilizations or their galactic megastructures, the evidence of which, presumably, would be blazoned across our skies. So what explains this eerie silence? One proposed answer is that there are evolutionary stages between inert matter and advanced intelligent life that are so astronomically rare that they prevent all or nearly all life from ascending beyond it. Such stages have been called great filters.
Commercial ad.
Perhaps in our path of discovery, there awaits a great filter in the form of an advanced technology, so destructive and uncontainable that it annihilates any civilization that discovers it. Some even argue that such a technology has already arrived in the form of nuclear weapons. Perhaps all technological civilizations, in their pursuit of an ever greater understanding of physical reality, invariably discover the tremendous energy released by the splitting of the atom. In their subsequent development of this seductive power, they introduce a permanent existential danger that invariably leads to their eventual annihilation. If it is true that this or some other technology poses an assured existential catastrophe, then ancestor simulations might never come into existence. If all intelligent civilizations are doomed to destroy themselves, then the good news is that we probably do live in base reality, the real world. The bad news, however, is that we're probably not far off from destroying ourselves. But a great filter could also exist behind us, perhaps in the very genesis of life itself. One candidate is the initial forming of reproductive molecules, the RNA, which serves as the basis of all biological life on Earth. It has been suggested that as a result of random molecular collisions, the formation of RNA could be astronomically unlikely, in which case intelligent technological civilizations could be so rare that we...
I think Bryce Cameron, he writes on super intelligence and AI and all that jazz. So I get it from him specifically why he'll pick intelligence, but there's so many other variables. But I don't know much about technology, the AI side of stuff. I've heard some very pop stuff like Sam Harris and all that. Perhaps it's relying on technology on the frontier of intelligence rather than anything else. Like, where decades ago it was books and high university. It's but who knows?
We could conceivably be the only one in existence. To many, including myself, this is an astonishing claim, and we are right to be skeptical. After all, the Great Filter hypothesis was informed by the Fermi paradox, and yet many believe that the Fermi paradox is ultimately misleading. Evidence of other civilizations could be far subtler than we first imagine. Consider that if intelligent life evolves just once in every 10 million galaxies, there would still be thousands of advanced civilizations utterly undetectable by us, yet any number of which could be creating countless simulations. Maybe our descendants will build a matryoshka brain, a stellar megastructure that surrounds the sun and uses its energy to create immense computational power. Such structures could conceivably run astronomical numbers of simulations, and yet a matryoshka brain could be all but invisible to its galactic neighbors. The universe, while very ancient from our perspective, is in fact at an extremely early stage in its overall habitability for life. At some 14 billion years old, the universe will remain habitable for much, much longer. Some stars will live for trillions of years, many times the current age of the universe. There will also be many generations of such long-lived stars. Given that intelligent life has emerged at least once at this very early...
What I'm writing on now, I'm kind of distracting myself in relation to this. Like I said, I should be writing, and today's supposed to be a writing day, but since I'm live streaming, make sure I have some notes just in case if things pop in. So, let's have a look, okay?
The moment in the universe's existence, there would therefore seem a good chance of other civilizations emerging in its vast future. And as this relates to the simulation argument, it matters not that from our perspective, those civilizations could exist in the future. because we could very well be simulations of their ancient past. For our present purposes, all that matters is the possibility of their eventual existence.
When you enter Sunglass Hut, you enter the House of Sun, where the options are endless. So whether you want all eyes on you, or you're looking to reinvent yourself, at Sunglass Hut, there's a pair for every version of you. Sunglass Hut. Find
Proposition 2. No simulations.
Okay, just check this out.
We'll now move on to Bostrom's second proposition, that civilizations can reach technological maturity, and yet in spite of this, they never author simulations which could resemble our world. As with the first proposition, at first glance this appears very unlikely indeed. Presumably, simulations would allow their creators to explore a vast range of questions: scientific, sociological, cosmological, even philosophical. Such simulations would serve as advanced laboratories, probing questions that could well be inconceivable to minds like ours. In many respects, simulations would be the ultimate theory testers, because the architects would have total control over all of the conditions within. Given the vast utility of such simulations, we are left wondering what plausible reasons could prevent civilizations from creating them. One possibility is that simulations of a kind which could resemble our world are impossible. Given the advancing realism of our own simulated worlds, this proposition too seems unlikely. So why take it seriously? There are at least two reasons why true ancestor simulations could be impossible. The first reason is that simulating a universe like ours would be computationally impossible, because simulating every fine-grained detail, from the level of probabilistic subatomic particles to massive galaxies, would be so computationally expensive that it would be unobtainable for even the most advanced technological civilization. The physicist Michio Kaku dismisses the simulation hypothesis for this very reason, pointing out that the only information processor which is up to the task of simulating a universe is the universe itself. This objection may or may not be true, but it also overlooks that a convincing simulation would not need to render every detail of the universe, rather only those which are being observed. Distant visible galaxies, for example, could be compressed to just a few bits of information, depending on whether observers are paying attention. Much like in video games, which render objects and scenes only when interacted with by a virtual avatar, a simulation could dramatically cut computational costs by rendering only those parts of the simulation which are of direct relevance. Neither would they need to render the long past of the universe or the timelines of the entities inhabiting it. Memories could be implanted to give the impression of continuity when in fact the present simulation could be just moments old. If the architects wish to create a simulation that appears identical to our world, they would need only to manipulate the conscious experiences of its inhabitants. This takes us to the second possible reason why such simulations might be impossible. Bostrom's argument entails more than the creation of hyper-realistic worlds. It invokes conscious inhabitants originating from within the simulation. In the Matrix films, the human inhabitants of the Matrix remain connected to physical bodies that persist in space.
Oh, Vegas. Oh, glad I've... Matrix might be true, says Nick Boston. Okay, so he's been on Joe Rogan and all that. Brian, is that the interview? Truth and Cyber. Jack Adams TV. Yeah, he's got a few more subs than I do, which is I don't know.
If you think this is real life, if you think this is real life,
What the F am I talking about when I say the simulation?
4 hours. Fuck. Yeah, that sounds like a wanker though. There's David Icke, which quite the conspiracy theorist. Let's go to click on the first one, eh? This matches might be true. Let's have a look, eh?
Have you ever considered the possibility that you're living in a simulation? Perhaps after watching Neo take the red pill and learning the truth that he had spent all of his life hooked up to an alien supercomputer, you started wondering the same about your own life.
what truth? That you are a slave, Neo. Like everyone else, you were born into bondage, born into a prison that you cannot smell or taste or touch.
How could you possibly tell if all you ever experienced was within the simulation? You would have no way of comparing it to anything else. Some people take weird occurrences during ordinary life as proof of the simulation. The Reddit forum Glitch in the Matrix, with nearly 1 million users, is home to those sorts of speculations. But you need not be a sci-fi obsessed nerd or suffering from delusions to believe to live in a simulation. According to Oxford philosopher Nick Bostrom, it is actually reasonable to assume that the world we are living in is not the fundamental reality, but rather one of many computer-simulated worlds. In his argument, he presents 3 alternate possibilities, one of which is very likely to be true. The first possibility is that we're not living in a simulation, because no intelligent life manages to stay alive long enough to develop the necessary technology to produce lifelike simulations. Meaning there aren't any sufficiently powerful simulations in existence because civilizations die out or self-destruct before reaching their full technological potential.
The danger is serious and real, and we must not underestimate it.
The second possibility is that humanity will at some point reach the stage where it has the capacity to run lifelike simulations. One look at the difference between the video games of the 1980s and the astoundingly realistic 3D games we have today suggests this isn't mere speculation. As long as this progress continues, even if significantly slower compared to the incredible speed so far, it seems guaranteed that we'll reach this stage at some point. In the absence of some global catastrophe that sets us back to the Dark Ages, sooner or later, these kinds of powerful simulations will be possible. But perhaps we simply decide not to use this technology. So that is the second possibility. We don't live in a simulation because despite having the capability, we don't make use of it. The third possibility is that humanity does make use of it. And there are countless simulated worlds to the one and only original real world. If it's the third possibility that is true, it is far more likely that we find ourselves in one of the simulated worlds and not in the base reality that gave rise to all simulations.
It would seem to follow that the odds that we're in base reality is 1 in billions. So tell me what's wrong with that argument.
The truly fascinating thing to think about is how or if we can ever come into contact with the fundamental reality and with the programmers of our simulation. The creator or creators of our simulation would probably know what our ultimate purpose is and what it all means. They would be in effect like a god.
Last line he said like it's quite interesting. Those who can kind of create it is like a god sort of thing. The end of humanity is fucking TED Talks. Next, I can't. I'm not in the mood to fucking deal with this fucking thing. Next, Bregman. Oh, shots fired. Stop playing with yourself. Oh, okay, master. Yeah, probably. No fap. Okay, is that Nick Boston? So yeah, we'll have a look at this.
One way to think about human history is as the process of extracting balls from a great urn of inventions. The vulnerable world hypothesis is the hypothesis that there is at least one black ball in the urn. In other words, there is some level of technological development at which civilization gets devastated by default.
Peggy.
Normally, we humans are not very good at thinking ahead. We kind of see what happens and react and learn and adapt. We have survived risk from nature for hundreds of thousands of years. The human species has been around for a long time. That obviously doesn't work with existential risk because you only get one time, right? One existential catastrophe, game over. We have all of these billions of potential germination points, planets, and yet so far a total number of 0 extraterrestrial civilizations that have come to our planet or made themselves visible to us. I say that this would be very bad news if we were to discover independently evolved life on Mars. What might we need to do to prevent AIs and digital minds themselves from coming to Earth? We would have to come up with new principles, new political constitutions, new ways of working together that would actually make sense in a society.
Now, I'm typing in social for beginners. Was it not yesterday, but Monday, I had an interview with a political party. So, social, may as well learn more about it. Let's go.
Washington, April 6, 1960. Memorandum from the Deputy Assistant Secretary of State for Inter-American Affairs to the Assistant Secretary.
So, okay, may as well have a look.
The difference between socialism, communism, Marxism, and a whole lot more, explained by me, a sure scapegoat. There is a lot of confusion about these terms, socialist, communist, people calling Obama socialist, communist, without really having any proper idea of what those things mean. And this has pretty much always been a problem with socialism and communism. It even says so in the preamble to the Communist Manifesto written in 1848. So I'm here to tell you what all the different terms actually mean. Most people in the Western world, especially in America, have heard of Bernie Sanders. Bernie Sanders calls himself a socialist and talks a lot about Scandinavian countries like Sweden and Denmark, praising them for social welfare system which provide things like free education, healthcare and other benefits or security nets, all paid for by the government. Scandinavia is, wrongly, even by a lot of people within Scandinavia itself, I know because I live there myself, called socialist. Bernie Sanders ran against Hillary Clinton in the Democrats' primaries in 2016. He lost the Democratic nomination to Clinton, who went on to run against Donald Trump. Donald Trump talks a lot about China, specifically the People's Republic of China, which calls itself socialist, with Chinese characteristics, of course. Donald Trump won the presidential election and became the 45th president of the United States of America, replacing the man who came before him, Barack Obama.
Come on, commercials.
Obama talked on multiple occasions about Guantanamo Bay, which is a military facility on the island of Cuba, but belonging to the nation of the USA. Cuba says that the land where the Guantanamo Bay facility is located belongs to the Cuban state, which calls itself socialist. Do you know who else called themselves socialists? The Nazis. Nazi is shorthand for Nationalsozialistische Deutsche Arbeiterpartei, which translates to the National Socialist German Workers' Party, NSDAP. So what does Sweden, Bernie Sanders, China, Cuba, and the Nazis have in common? Well, in practice, nothing. Sweden, not entirely unlike China, is a country with a mainly capitalistic free market system, but with some government intervention and social security paid for by the raising of taxes on those who earn more. Cuba is what many in the world would call communist, choosing not to rely on a private free market, but rather a public, planned economy where elected representatives make decisions about the economy that would otherwise be made by private business owners, like where to build new factories, what they should produce, what the wages should be, and so on. And although many in the West call Cuba communist, Cuba calls itself socialist. Yes, they are led by the Communist Party, but even they say that Cuba is socialist, not communist. And Germany, when it was ruled by the Nazis, also called itself socialist. And although the government was a totalitarian one, which dictated many things about the private lives of citizens, the economy was largely still capitalistic and had a free market, minus some protectionism and sanctions or embargoes here and there. So, what exactly does...
Can you start noticing the political stuff as well? Fucking hell, it's just going to be... And if you take this thing, it was a socialist-based political party that I had interviews with, so...
Does socialism mean? Well, long story short, it's a pretty vague term that could mean pretty much whatever you want it to mean.
Yep.
The definition of socialism is a society in which the means of production, distribution, and exchange are owned by the community as a whole rather than private individuals. Of the examples that I brought up, Scandinavia, Bernie Sanders, Cuba, and the Nazis, the only one that really fits this definition is Cuba. Because the means of production, that is factories and other workplaces like farms, for example, the means of distribution and the means of exchange are owned by the state, that is the community as a whole. And the state is democratic, as in run by the people that live in the nation. And so the people, indirectly through the democratic government, control the means of production, distribution, and exchange. Sweden and Norway and Denmark own some of the means of production, some of the means of distribution and exchange, but I would say over 90% of the means of production in Scandinavia are privately owned. And so the community as a whole do not control the means of production, distribution, or exchange in Scandinavia. And so Scandinavia is, for the most part, and according to most definitions of socialism, not socialistic. They are capitalistic, following an ideology called social democracy, which I will talk about in a minute. So, I've given you the definition of socialism, or more accurately, I've given you the definition of a socialist society. Socialism, the ideology, is trying to achieve that kind of society. It's what's called an umbrella term, encompassing multiple other terms within it that branch away further. So let's create a nice little infographic thing, right? We have socialism on the left and then capitalism on the right. Simple enough. Under socialism, we have communism. Now, communism is an ideology that strives to establish communist society, which is stateless, moneyless, and most importantly, classless. Think Star Trek.
Economics of the future.
Okay. And yes, it's just what he said, economics of the future. I do think it is. And I don't think that will ever be a classist society. But I do think hopefully a healthier version of the, you know what I mean, the back and forth and interaction and stuff like that. But unfortunately too, when doing academics, it's hard to take in the variable of human nature, emotions, insecurities, levels of intelligence, etc., etc. So And a lot of people don't take into consideration of the landscape, physical geography, but the immediate communities as well. So, ooh.
Sure, is somewhat different. You see, money doesn't exist in the 24th century.
No money.
Yes, it does.
You mean you don't get paid?
The acquisition of wealth is no longer the driving force in our lives. We work to better ourselves and the rest of humanity.
Now, communist society should be distinguished from the Western concept of a communist state, the latter being a socialist state ruled by a communist party. For example, the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics, the USSR or the Soviet Union, was ruled by the Communist Party, but the Communist Party didn't say, oh, the USSR is communist. They said the USSR is socialist. Now, under communism, we have two other ideologies, anarchism and classical Marxism. I won't talk that much about anarchism in this video, that will be for another time, but essentially the difference between Marxism and anarchism is that classical Marxism believes in a transition between capitalism and communism called socialism, whereas anarchism seeks to establish communism directly after the overthrow of capitalism and not go through a transitionary period. That said, anarchists still count as socialists. Classical Marxism splits even further into orthodox Marxism and revisionist Marxism. Orthodox Marxism is essentially a continuation of classical Marxism, but was developed after the death of Karl Marx. Karl Marx, obviously the founder of classical Marxism, left off.
Fun fact, Karl Marx was so poor at one stage of his life that he pawned off his last pair of shoes, which he wore into the pawn shop.
A lot of his work unfinished, and so orthodox Marxists sort of picked up the torch when Marx died and continued his work and continued expanding his theories. Revisionist Marxism, on the other hand, is an umbrella term for forms of Marxism that have changed one or more fundamental parts of Marxism. Social democracy is a form of revision.
Can't take it. I'm iffy about the trust portion now. Warren Chapman. Oh, that's fascism. Okay, theory and theory and philosophy. I think it's theory and philosophy. Airport. Warren Chapman. Airport philosophy. I've heard of why. Political theory. What is philosophy? See, okay. Rosa Luxemburg. Okay, I've heard of her. I don't know much of her work.
Hey everyone, back again. Today I want to talk about Rosa Luxemburg's pamphlet essay text titled Reform or Revolution, or Social Reform or Revolution. Now before jumping into this, hi, I'm David. I try to explain philosophical concepts and ideas in ways to make them accessible to you. So if you're new here, subscribe and you'll see videos I release every week, sometimes twice a week. You can go check out my some 250 episodes I already have up in which I try to explain all these concepts in accessible ways. If you want to follow me anywhere other than here, you can follow me on Instagram at theory_and_philosophy or on Twitter at David Guineo. If you want to help me out.
I should have thought this through, like, I think YouTube's fucking changed the thingamabob. Edward Saylor, that's another guy I've heard of a lot, but not checked out a lot of his work. Dust Capital. What is seduction? The world of wrestling. Conspiracy theories, yeah. Young, Good and Evil. What is intersection? We'll do some basics as well to help clear up the red pill theories and stuff.
Hey everyone, back again. Today I'm going to talk about Kimberly Crenshaw.
And guys, please, Kimberly Crenshaw, which I've not heard of. But before I continue, do find this guy's YouTube channel, okay?
Shaw's notion of intersectionality. Now, I've done an episode on the essay that this comes from, and you can go check that out if you want. This will be a little bit more of a concise thing about the term specifically. Now, before jumping into that, if you want to follow me anywhere other than here, you can find me on Instagram at theory_and_philosophy or on Twitter at David Guigno. If you're new here, welcome. I'm David. I try to explain philosophical texts and ideas in a way to make them accessible to you. So if you're new, like, share, subscribe, tell your friends. Who knows, they might get a kick out of it. If you want to help me out, do all those things. You can help me out monetarily via Patreon or PayPal if you're interested in that at all, but obviously no pressure. If you found this in podcast form, you're going to be able to find the video on YouTube. Or if you found me on YouTube, you're going to be able to find this in podcast form pretty much anywhere where you get podcasts. So don't want to waste any more of your time with that stuff. Let's jump into this very important term that Crenshaw gives us.
Okay.
And I would like to say there is a longer history here with this term that traces back to certain African feminist philosophers in certain African settings that I don't know the whole history of, but just focusing today on how Crenshaw deploys it and what motivated her to think about this term and to really bring it into the spotlight. Now, Crenshaw was trained as a lawyer. She went to law school, and this really informs her understanding of intersectionality because she developed this idea upon looking at various court cases in which she recognized the law deployed what she called a single axis framework to understanding discrimination. So she says that this legal system was unable to understand the possibility that, and these are the cases that she looked at, that Black women would be experiencing discrimination in a way that was different from white women and Black men. So according to the legal framework, people could only be discriminated against based on gender or race, not a mix of both. Now, to demonstrate this, she looks at 3 different court cases. I'm not going to go into detail about them here. I've covered them in a lot more detail in that other episode I did on the entire essay, so I'm going to be quite brief about it here.
Okay.
But in each of the cases, Black women brought forward complaints that their employers were discriminating against them based off the fact that they were Black women, not that they were Black or women.
So, yeah, to be honest, I'm a bit, in terms of the academic side of intersectionality, I never could focus on that sort of stuff. So, connecting the two, like, I try to write on individuality, specifically trying to be a loner, but, no. But I still interact with people.
But that it was because of a mix of both. But to this, the court said, well, we cannot grant Black women special privileges because they aren't a recognized category within the judicial framework. So in order for a complaint to be brought forward, a complaint of discrimination, what the Black women had to do who were bringing forward these cases was had to prove that there was discrimination based off of gender and that there was discrimination based off of race. But the problem with that was that when they actually researched this, they found that looking at gender, white women were doing very well. So they could then not say that gender was a basis of discrimination that the employer was using. Likewise, they couldn't prove that race was actually a determining factor of discrimination, or race was being discriminated against, because Black men were doing particularly well in these industries as well. But looking at all the data that they were presenting, Black women were being continually refused positions in authority. They would be treated with hostility in ways that white women and Black men were not. And so they were looking at these facts and saying, like, there is something going on here. There is something going on that is specific to the experiences of Black women, at least how they are being treated within these industries, that cannot be understood in terms of these single axis frameworks of either race-based discrimination or gender-based discrimination. Now, the immediate issue with the single axis framework is that it sets the most privileged groups within any given group. It sets the most privileged group as the standard. So in the case of gender, white women are the standard. So if white women are doing well, then that's fine. Then there's absolutely nothing wrong with it. There's no proof that could be mounted then that gender-based discrimination is occurring. But as these women brought forward, Black women were being discriminated against, but that wasn't taken seriously because Black women weren't understood to be a category that could experience discrimination differently from Black men or white women. Another difficulty that these Black women faced was in attributing a certain arithmetic to this discrimination. So one of the things that they confronted was the fact that, or brought forward, was the fact that Black women experienced discrimination greater than the sum of the parts of that discrimination. So if we're just using gender and race here, these Black women were bringing forward the case that the discrimination that they were experiencing was greater than just gender-based and race-based discrimination combined. It was something more than that, which was just beyond the comprehension of the judicial system. They just could not comprehend this possibility that the sum was greater than its part. So in many of these cases, I believe 2 of the 3, these women's cases were just thrown out of court because there was no basis with it, just because the judicial system did not have the capacity to recognize how differently situated people can experience discrimination differently. So, and this extends much further than this as well, beyond race and gender, to class as well, to sexuality and so on. These are all elements that can be discriminated against and have been proven time and time again to be sites of discrimination. But they're only ever taken as single things, not as possibly...
They're taking perception as well, so we'll give it a go. Type in this. Okay, is that one I just watched? Armchair academics. I'll explain. So since it's the new trying to dive into the theories of this, so I hope I can explain. Oh, this guy, yeah. So yeah, I've seen some of these theories and stuff.
Yeah, intersectionality is something that's just come up in public discourse so much within the last year or two. A term that I feel like was pretty relatively unknown within the last 20 years, but all of a sudden it really has kind of raised public awareness as issues of social justice and oppression and race issues and these kinds of things have come to the forefront of a lot of political debate and discussion. So I want to give my thoughts on intersectionality. I've addressed some of these cultural issues in the past. You can check out videos and podcasts that I've done on feminism, on gender theory, on cultural Marxism, the Frankfurt School, and some of that stuff that's very much related to this, because a lot of this really does tie together in terms of things that are kind of related to ideological progressivism. So intersectionality is something that, I heard a lot about. I never made comments about it. I didn't for a while. And the reason is because I'm not comfortable making comments about something that I haven't done my own research on. I'm not the type of person that will just kind of watch a video from my own perspective that's critiquing something and then just kind of echo those criticisms. So before I made any comments about intersectionality, I wanted to just read what the actual intersectional authors were saying. So I did go out of my way to read a couple books, which were,
Head to Chemist Warehouse and save big brands like Swiss Beauty High Strength Marine Collagen, $19.99. Fat plastic.
Set forth as kind of introductory manuals to intersectionality from those who promoted this view, so I could really get a more balanced understanding of where they're coming from, what these ideas are all about. So basically, intersectionality began in 1989. Kimberly Crenshaw is the founder of intersectionality as a movement. She's the first one to use the term. It got a lot more popular through the 1990s, particularly in more radical feminism, gender theory, different areas of study, and only recently has it kind of come into public consciousness. So, what is intersectionality? What does the term mean? So basically, intersectionality differentiates itself from older feminism, and that would be like second wave feminism, which identifies itself more so in terms of a kind of neo-Marxism, or what's sometimes called cultural Marxism. In other words, the idea that there are basically two classes, kind of the oppressor, and then there's the oppressed class. So you have kind of an us versus them thing, and it's easy to kind of categorize. These are the oppressors, these are the oppressed. With second wave feminism, often it's the case that oppressor is man, the oppressed is woman, and these are kind of two clashing groups of people. And what happened within feminism is there were a lot of statements and assertions from especially white feminists that all women have the same kinds of experiences. We're all women, we're all oppressed, therefore we have to fight against the patriarchy. And the fact was that, particularly Black women and Hispanic women as well started coming out and saying, well, you white women really have a very different cultural experience, and you have privilege in areas that we don't. So there really is no way to just divide people as these are men.
Side note, I'm going to bed too, so I'm going to be smarter on this bloke.
These are women. Women all have the same experience of oppression, because there's a very different experience for a Black woman than there is for a white woman in, for example, the United States. And this doesn't just have to do with the United States either, but that's where I live, so that's what I'm thinking of. So this then sets up this idea that there is a kind of there are these intersections of one's identity that one must understand in order to understand systems of oppression. In other words, we can't think just simplistically in terms of, say, women are oppressed and men are oppressors, but we have to think about all the other facets of life as well to figure out what the systems of oppression are really all about. So then this leads to some other discussions, particularly when this starts, it really is about race being added to what was kind of second into third wave feminism. So now you have gender and race. Sexuality is pretty early on tied into that. And so you have a lot of lesbian women who are writing in this field of intersectionality, talking about oppression and the different experiences they have with their sexuality and other things. So you have basically these kind of three main areas then, which are gender, race, and sexuality. Eventually, you do have ideas of class coming in, which is more classical Marxism, economic issues as well. And today it's really expanded to all sorts of things. Now you have issues of disability, and you have issues of, how obese somebody is, and all sorts of other things as well. And they're all kind of tied together. So, intersectionality, when I've read some of their work, in some ways it appears as if, in some ways it's more.
See, this is why I should be learning, because I do like to write. When I try to write more philosophical basis individuality, and a lot of this guys, what he's saying is right. I just don't have the language to use this from the academic side. So, who knows, hey? Let's have a look.
Nuanced than the older kind of Frankfurt school of Marxism or neo-Marxism. And they're critical of Marxism in some ways. because they do try to have a nuanced, holistic understanding of human persons than just to be able to categorize them into simply one class or another class. And so some ways, I appreciate that it's a little more nuanced, and they're trying to kind of get at the complexities of life, which extend far beyond, just gender or something like that, or economic class. And so they're right that these things certainly do intersect, and they do impact one's identity and all of these various ideas and places in society and gender and sexuality and all that stuff. It does impact how you function in the world, how people treat you, and all those kinds of stuff. So that part of it is true, but the problem
it's also too like personal truth. Like my personal truth is this, my personal truth is that, and plus perception. So that's where it's going to become conflicting, which the human element is emotion. So
and there are many problems. But part of the problem is they're really still doing the same thing. They've just added more categories, but essentially they're still trying to lump people together in these little groups. The groups have just kind of changed. And so the groups have changed. Now it's not just women, but it's Black women or Black lesbian women or Black disabled lesbian women. And so it doesn't really solve, I think, the issue. And I think if you're going to really be consistent and think through the issue, what you really come down to is the fact that people just have different experiences, and all people have different experiences. And certainly we can say, yeah, there are a lot of similarities in those who happen to have the same race and gender. But ultimately, our experiences are our own. And it does seem that the kind of categories that intersectionality is working with are kind of arbitrary, because if you're talking about privilege and what gets you ahead in society, I mean, you can just add categories kind of ad infinitum. There are so many factors, like, attractiveness, for example. If you are more attractive, you will get ahead in life. So do we start talking about, attractive privilege? And I guess maybe thin privilege is part of that. But being attractive is more than being thin. Being athletic. If you're athletic, you tend to be more popular. Extroverts tend to get ahead in some ways that introverts don't, because they naturally know how to talk to people and naturally are better in social situations, which is going to get them more connections. Which, the point is, you can just expand and expand and expand and expand and expand to the point where you're the only person that fits your unique category, which is true because we're all individuals and have different personalities and have different experiences. So while intersectionality, in a sense, does kind of get at the complexities better than, kind of neo-Marxism does, in reality, like, we're all just different people. We all have different experiences. We can't just subsume ourselves into these little group identities. And so that really leads, I think, to a very major problem. The other problem that you find within, intersectionality is...
Shut up and take my money.
Avoid having to make that face this holiday.
That you do kind of have this reverse hierarchy where it does appear that there is even a kind of competition among individuals to see who can be the most oppressed. And, I say this for just kind of knowing some people that are...
I just found a new documentary, which I kind of started watching last night or Monday. Just have a check it out, okay? Come on this journey. Thank you for yourself.
Our young people are being indoctrinated at school. I'm Calvin Robinson. I've been a school teacher, an assistant head teacher, a school governor, a director of a couple of free schools that I helped set up, as well as a consultant for the Department of Education. I've seen all of this firsthand, but my lived experience, so to speak, has been contested. Therefore, I'm going to speak to people in this program who've also witnessed what's going on. Teachers, parents, governors, and people in the political square. We're going to get to the bottom of the issue. Why are our young people being taught contested ideologies that are undermining our very way of life?
I work constantly.
Education did not used to be a battleground. Schools used to be a place that parents sent their children to learn the 3 R's: reading, writing, and arithmetic. However, these days we have a lot of activist teachers who want to be social justice warriors in the classroom and impart their own values onto your children. And in this program, we're going to be looking at 3 main areas. Race, this idea that black children and white children should be separated, and white children should be taught about their privilege and their unconscious bias, and black children should be taught that they are oppressed, they're victims, and we as a society are holding them back. Secondly, gender, the idea that your sex is something that is assigned to you at birth, and that you later choose your gender as you grow up. And thirdly, general lefty bias. We know that 70% of teachers are left-leaning, but they are teaching resources that demonstrate that to be on the left of politics means that you care about people, you're compassionate, and you support the NHS. But on the right of politics, you care about yourself and big business. This is unacceptable. It's not what schools are for, and we're going to delve into it. One of the biggest areas of contention today is what is known as critical race theory.
What we are against is the teaching of contested political ideas as if they are accepted facts. We don't do this with communism, we don't do this with socialism, we don't do it with capitalism. And I want to speak about a dangerous trend in race relations that has come far too close to home to my life. And it is the promotion of critical race theory, an ideology that sees my blackness as victimhood and their whiteness as oppression.
Critical race theory might sound like a good idea in practice. Most of the advocates of critical race theory are well-intentioned. However, it comes from a dark place. It's set up, like all critical theories, to undermine the very fabric of Western society. And how that presents itself in education is that we're separating or segregating young people based on skin. We're even separating and segregating the curriculum based on skin color. In history lessons, we're teaching kids about black history, as if up until now we've only been teaching white history. Of course, we live in a predominantly white country, so most of our history will involve white figures, but that's not an issue of race. That's not racist. In this country, we teach British history, European history, and world history. We teach about the factual events that have helped shape the nation that we live in today. We do not teach about immutable characteristics in history. And the same in the music curriculum. There is an idea that we should decolonize it and remove dead white men. And that means replacing people like Mozart, who have helped shape music in composition, in the way that we understand music, in the way that we compose music, and replace people like Mozart with more fashionable figures like Stormzy, because he happens to be a black artist. Stormzy's most popular hit is Shut Up, Rude Boy, Shut Up. I wouldn't say it's of the same caliber as Mozart's, but this is the fundamental problem with critical race theory. It's not about meritocracy. It's not about the canon. It's not about teaching the best there has been or what has helped shape this nation. It's about what looks good. It's about virtue signaling, and it's about more brown faces for the sake of it and less dead white men for the sake of it. It's actually quite racist.
Well, I think it's a very interesting question. What are children actually being taught when it comes to critical race theory? Because I think it's not the case that teachers, I mean, it's clearly not the case that teachers are sitting down with children as young as 3, 4, and 5 and teaching them complex legal theories on race and racism. No teacher is standing there saying to a group of 7-year-olds.
And honestly, most people are looking for interactions and stuff, and that's probably what I'm searching for. Let's continue.
Right, children, it's 11 o'clock, it's time for our critical race theory lessons. And I think because of that, it's very convenient, if you like, for activists to be able to deny that this is actually happening. They can say, no, critical race theory is not being taught in schools, precisely because teachers are not sitting down and saying, take out your critical race theory books, boys and girls. But what is being taught are ideas that are inspired by critical race theory or derive from critical race theory. And put very bluntly, these are ideas of white superiority, white privilege, and black disadvantage.
My daughter was definitely sort of trained with critical race theory, if you like. So she was introduced to terminologies, glossaries, very precise definitions, and they were presented as if they were fact, even though really they related to theories which are just ideas, and some people do and some people don't agree with them. She was also taught about sex positivity, which is a theory about the way you might approach sexual relations, and a number of other kind of iterations. So intersectionality was discussed actually a lot, and that would include describing the power structures of the country and various theories associated with what I think most people would call social justice theory.
Heated, weighted terminology like white privilege can have the effect of racializing children, can it not? What other terms did you find embedded in the curricula?
Yes, certainly my daughter was told that she would have her own white privilege, that she might be anxious about it, or is likely to be anxious about it. She was told that it's okay to have white privilege, but what is not okay is to pretend it doesn't exist. And on the flip side of that, children were racialized altogether because Black children were told that their lives would be, should be considered in danger, that the police and the government treated their lives as expendable. And that was often described as perhaps pertaining to America, perhaps pertaining to the UK, but very often they didn't even specify. So children were given an idea of their future, an idea of their safety, an idea of their anxiety, all based on racialization, really, what race their skin color happened to be.
And did you see any credited sources in these materials? When you mentioned, for example, they're pointing at cases in America and cases in Britain, talking about police brutality, was that backed up with data?
Very often.
First station of academics, always go to the journals first, or as this guy just said, data.
And it wasn't. And in order to find out actually where the material came from, I just wrote a few phrases down and punched them into the internet and would find sources that were very often anything from a teen magazine to something very political, some mainstream media, but often a lot of kind of, sources that you couldn't really even identify the origin of. And I think that concerned me a lot, that even if the teaching was shown to parents, we weren't actually being told where it came from and what shape was shaping the education. And I think largely some of the staff probably wouldn't even know themselves as they deliver this lesson where this information is coming from.
So would it be right to assume that they're not teaching knowledge at this point, they're teaching values?
I think they're teaching ideas and values, and certainly ones which you could not describe as being fact.
Essentially, I'm convinced the same kind of ideas are being presented, because to my mind, a lot of this actually stems from teacher training, and it's the ideas that many teachers have become imbued with in the course of their training for their profession. And again, another thing that concerns me is that for many teachers, I'm convinced this is not even seen as being a political thing. They don't see themselves as saying, all right, I can't wait to get to school today so I can politically indoctrinate lots of children. I think perhaps a small proportion think that, but I think the overwhelming majority of teachers don't. And I think they just think this is a common sense view, or this is the only view, or even just this is a being a nice person view about racism. And when they go and teach these ideas in the classroom, I don't think they necessarily even see themselves as political activists. But absolutely, I think the Black Lives Matter protests that we saw gave this a huge boost. I think in the sense that it made it much more explicit, and it gave much more of a sense of mission and a sense of purpose around this form of instruction. So you even saw, I think it was one school in Wales, a secondary school in Wales, where children were taken out onto the playground at lunchtime to take the knee. Now that's a shocking thing, I think, to get children, secondary school children, to do, because essentially children in a school, they are a captive audience. It's very difficult for a child to refuse to do that. To me, that's an overt political gesture. Well, I actually think this is very widespread. I think that we could safely say, or I feel as if I could safely say, that this reaches 100% of schools. And the reason why I can say that with such a degree of confidence is because I actually think it's embedded in the curriculum in a number of different areas. If you look at the history curriculum, geography, English literature classes, for example, these are school subjects which have actually been decolonized. They've been swept up in the movement to decolonize, which are very much put in parallel with the critical race theory movement. So essentially decolonizing the curriculum means going through reading lists to ensure not just equal representation, but to root out anything that could be deemed old-fashioned or have negative attitudes towards race, and replace it with more up-to-date texts that are conveying the correct political messages. Nobody wants teachers to stand up and kind of spout racist nonsense to children. I mean, that would be a terrible thing to do, but it's controversial precisely because people are concerned that actually creates racism in the classroom.
Political activists are always yelling at me that we need to diversify the curriculum, we need to broaden the curriculum, we need fewer dead white men, we need more black history on the curriculum. And one of the arguments they use is that we weren't taught about black history in school, or we weren't taught about the British Empire in school. And my response is usually, well, how do you know? Is it that you don't remember being taught it? Is it that you were taught it poorly? Or were you taught it? Let's look at the national curriculum. So I thought, okay, let's give them the benefit of the doubt. Maybe people weren't taught this, or maybe people aren't being taught this now. So I sampled 8,000 to 9,000 teachers in a poll to ask them what is being taught. And the scary fact is that most teachers now are not using textbooks. We can no longer pick up a book and see what is being taught in the classroom. Even scarier than that, most teachers are using resources that they download from the internet. And the most popular teaching...
So I'm not even fucking focusing, so fucking tired. I gotta run down to the shop, Susan, and get some dinner. I didn't grab this afternoon, but just find something. Promised Lands by, what's her name? So Susan Sontag, check her out. It's not in this. Like, no, it's not in this. It's like
To pray for all rulers and for the peaceful ordering of the nations, that men may serve God and one another in freedom and with justice, and to dedicate ourselves anew to his service.
With all this in mind, what are we to say? If God is on our side, who is against us? He did not spare his own son, but surrendered him for us all. And with this gift, how can he fail to lavish upon us all he has to give? Who will be the accuser of God's chosen ones? It is God who pronounces acquittal. Then who can condemn? It is Christ, Christ who died, and more than that, was raised from the dead, who is at God's right hand, and indeed pleads our cause.
Next week's Saturday special starts at a new time once again of 15:15, when we'll have rugby league, rugby union, racing, and England for red football from England and Scotland. Until 15:15, goodbye. Very feeling, my word, you can't see him for dust. Well, a 9-minute bulletin of world news follows, and then we have letter from London. And whilst Africa and Europe have alternative programs, we'll have Wally Whiteman's Birth Country. This is London.
Can I just say that everybody who is free would be welcome to come to the Consulate General to have a drink with us now.
Yes.
Hello, how are you?
Fine, thanks. How are you now?
Same place.
Yes, we're still in our Looking close to you. No, I say we fixed up a one-way valve between us and our landladies, the other sisters. So the odor of sanctity doesn't equally the odor of unsanctity doesn't pollute the dear sisters. See?
No, we only tried it right up. The electric panel in the
Darcy and
We roll with love when we see each other.
he's the one that roars. I've never seen
One thing I'm sure, to be a soldier, you have to be right here. It's great to be between these guys here and everybody here in this country. When it comes to time like this, everybody, it's like just like one big family, one big family. You can't even call it war machine, you know, just one family. Everybody do everything for everybody, and you just feel safe. And everybody know if something happened to him, he'll never stay on the field. Always someone will take him back, and they'll do everything to save him. You can't fight just because someone told you to fight, you know. You have to fight because we can't lose.
The hatred which we indoctrinate into the minds of our children from their birth is sacred. From a letter sent by the Syrian Minister of Education, Suleiman Al-Kash, to René Mo, Director General of UNESCO, Damascus, May 3rd, 1968. There's the Egyptian state seal, the Minister of Education and Instruction, the first year junior high school. A grammar exercise. The Arabs do not cease to act for the extermination of Israel. The Hashemite Kingdom of Jordan, Ministry of Education and Instruction, Modern History, the third year junior high school. The Jews in Europe were persecuted and despised because of their corruption, meanness, and treachery. Page 150. Copyright reserved to the Ministry of Education and Instruction, Syria. The Religious Ordinance Reader for second year junior high school. The Jews are scattered to the ends of the earth, where they lived exiled and despised, since by their nature they are ill, greedy, and enemies of mankind. By their nature they are tempting to steal a land as asylum for their disgrace. Page 138. The Hashemite Kingdom of Jordan, Ministry of Education and Instruction, Department for School Curriculum Textbooks, Islamic Teaching, for the fifth year junior school. It is the obligation of the Muslims to guard this holy land and not to let the Jews stay in any part of the country, since it is holy for the Muslims. Page 53. Egypt, the Minister of Education and Instruction, for third year junior high school. And every Jew who committed a crime somewhere and wished to escape from the hands of the law hurried to Palestine. Salam said, "Are not the Jews who stole our land the scum of the nations with nothing common between them?" Page 15. United Arab Republic, Minister of Education and Instruction. High school reader, the third year high school. O Mother Israel, dry your tears. Your children's blood, which is being spilled in the desert, will produce but thorn wormwood. Wipe off your blood, O Mother Israel. Have mercy and spare the desert, your filthy blood. Let every house be the wailing wall of Jews.
people swore here that it will never happen again, that we will not be slaughtered. And the Arabs for many years said that they're going to throw us into the sea. When people say throwing into the sea, people have the Jews have an inner ear, and the inner ear has memories, and the memories is Auschwitz. And Auschwitz can never happen again because Israel is the answer to Auschwitz. Like maybe Zionism is the answer to God. I mean, don't forget that Zionism is rebellions against the God of Israel. People don't understand it very well. Therefore, people use all kind of religious expression in Israel in an obscure way, because religion, to be a real Jew, is to live in a paradox. How come? Where is this God of Israel? Where was the God of Israel in the 2,000 years of suffering? So the complex of Auschwitz is very strong here. And when Nasser is making, it move forces in Sinai, people saw Auschwitz. And even now, when Sadat said he's going to take over the territory, people saw Auschwitz. And it's understandable. There are many people here who either that. We should also have the other side of Auschwitz, which is survival, which is that to live is to live, which is to find some solution to the problem so we can somehow live and not perish. And I'm talking about the Holocaust because it has so much. I mean, in 1948 there were 500,000 people, and then within a year or so, about 750,000 Jews from refugee camps and so on came in, and they gave a certain kind of stamp on Israel. But it's not seen on the surface. It's only I feel it only as the underneath nightmare. And I think every time there is a war, people get apocalyptic. People get into a feeling that this is Auschwitz, and now we're going to. And this time, in this war, it was almost so. Unlike the 6-Day War, where people felt it, but then we were ready. And for this time, we were caught with our pants down. And so, in the beginning was like that. The Jews lived for years with a messianic idea that there will be a Messiah that will take the children of Israel and bring them to the Promised Land. And once you go against that, you go against the whole essence of Judaism. Essence of Judaism was to live where they are and to make it better and to hope to come to Israel, but you not just come to Israel. Israel should be given to you by that God of... And any Messiah that came along was a false Messiah. But of course, all the Messiahs that proclaimed to be Messiah, like Shabtai Tzvi or people like that, were of course taken out of Judaism and put away. And I think Zionism is in a way sort of a lightened reflex of Shabtaim, of Hasidim and all that. In fact, all the anti-halakha movement in the history of Judaism were leaning towards Eretz Israel, and all the halakha was always against. I mean, when my grandfather went to Israel in the beginning of the century or the end of the last century, his father was saying that this is a sin to do that. I mean, you go there either to die on Mount Olive or you have to wait. And Zionism was like that. It took a lot of beautiful things out of Judaism and merged it into Tolstoyan song and dance and into early beautiful socialist ideas and mingled it all together into something that was supposed to create a new society here, which it did. It was amazing what these pioneers or these founding fathers did. But then they got into a Greek tragedy without knowing. The Jews know drama, they don't know tragedy. I mean, and here they were in a tragedy. They came to claim this land that was promised to them by people who believed in God, and they didn't. And then they found Arabs living here, and of course, the Arabs has all the rights to be here. They lived here for 2,000 years, and we came and tell them, look, you have many countries, why don't you live there? But they said, look, we live in Nablus, we want to live in Nablus. We live in Jerusalem for 1,500 years, we want to live in Jerusalem for 1,500 years. So we said to them, look, but you have Damascus, and you have empty deserts, and you have, but And so it didn't work out. So it became like a tragedy. We were right, and they were right, and we fought and fought and fought. So the end of it is either a Masada where one destroyed the other, or that we live in some sort of a compromise. We're really a nuisance in this world. I mean, we want to be rational people. We come from the West, you know, we have Western technology and Western ideas. And we came to reclaim a country for what? Because God promised this country 2,000 or 3,000 or 5,000 years to Abraham. It's very stupid. I mean, how can you take it rationally? I mean, my grandfather came to Palestine in 1900, and he was quite an intelligent man. Now, he came because God promised some old Arab, I don't know, was a kafir 5,000 years ago, that this will be his country. But in the meantime, Arabs were living here, and the Christians were living here, and the Romans were living here. And here the Jews came to reclaim a country. You don't just come to reclaim a country. You come to reclaim a country because you have a deed. Now, the deed is a mystical deed. It's a ridiculous deed. I mean, it's not a rational deed. A nice American Jew come to Israel with Harvard education because Abraham was promised this land. Otherwise, why should he come here? Why doesn't he live in New York? I mean, New York is a nice place for Jews.
قال إن هذه الحالة ستنتهي تدريجيا.
You know, someone said one that the revolution of 1905 in Russia failed in Russia and succeeded in Israel. Because there is a difference between the 1905 revolution and the 1917. And after all, the revolutionaries of 1905, the fighters for this, many of them were Jews, young Jews, who were disillusioned by the anti-Semitic events afterwards and came to Israel. And that was the second Aliyah that, in fact, made this country. I mean, because the first Aliyah was more or less, they were going to do something like Algeria here. I mean, with exception, of course. But second Aliyah came with this, there were the hippies. There were like a bunch of hippies coming here, living together and thinking in a socialism in a very, but they created a very powerful system, you know, and they've been in control of this country since the 30s, in a very strange system. On one hand, it's a democracy, and it is a democracy. One can say whatever he wants in this end. You're allowed to speak, and you're allowed to make fun, and you're allowed to criticize, and you're allowed to satirize, and yet they're not changing government. Voting is always about the same. The government don't change. I mean, of course, premiers change and all that, but the same party has been in control since 1933 or so. I mean, before the state even, and then Ben-Gurion and after that. Well, there was a great, real change in after the 6 Day War, and from the 6 Day War till last war, it was like 100 years in another country's life. I mean, we became much more consuming country. People got richer. People built villas. People, and so they got very secure and feeling stronger and richer, and people got bigger cars. I mean, it was very much like America in the 50s. People became very unconcerned about other people's suffering, other people's plights. I mean, this whole socialism of the country went out the window. So much money was available and so much development. I think that this war, it put an end to it in some strange way, because people are now going to evaluate things more seriously. There will not be so much money. People will have to pay for this war. This war was not only in life, but in money. It cost a lot, and we'll have to pay for it. So there will be an austerity in some way, and it will be good for us, because Israel used to be a very unique place 30 years ago, as culture is concerned, with compassion and feeling for others, and we were one family. And in the 6 years between the wars, it all went out the window because of many reasons that is not the time to describe it. But now the shock, the people are in shock. The whole country is in shock, and this shock will have a therapeutic effect on what's going to happen. And this big consuming society of the last 6 years it was all based on nothing. It was all built on chicken legs, and so this whole base has been taken away with cheap Arab work coming from the territories, and with the great dreams about the empire and all that. All this thing is over.
I was born in Israel, and so were both my parents. My family has been here for about 100 years now. I have not witnessed the first clash between the Arabs and the Jews in Israel, which happened in 1920 to 21. But I've had my parents tell me stories of this first onslaught, which took the Jewish population by surprise, mostly attacks in the cities at the time. That's when Jewish self-defense got organized, 1920 to 21. I do remember as a kid the pictures of the dead in the 1929 second Arab onslaught on us. This is when, for instance, the population of Jewish Hebron was massacred. The city was abandoned after that. It was a city which had a Jewish population for perhaps 1,000 years, and it was abandoned in 1929. Then as a kid, I helped carry messages during the 1936 to 39 troubles, which were called the Arab Rebellion. And I participated actively in the field in the War of Independence, 1947-48. Since then, I also took part in the War of 1956, and of course in the one of 1967. And so my count does not have this one as the fourth Arab-Israeli war. I think it's been going on for much longer than that. And we've had at least 50 years of an active military clash with the Arabs, which has this periodic nature with the length of the periods corresponding to the time it took the other side to forget about the previous defeat and try it again.
never as great as you made it to be. So how could this be explained, this remarkable efficiency and ability which Egyptians have displayed in operating missile networks which have paralyzed the efficiency of Israel's pilots? Your basic fault lay in your confusing between a civilization which declines and emerges at one time or another, and a civilization which constitutes a heritage which impregnates the behavior of a people and which is sustained throughout history. But whatever the results, although these have begun to emerge in this ferocious, long and bitter war, just as your leaders have predicted it would be, the battles have proved that the strikes of the Israeli army do not help to restore neither the future of Israel, its security, nor the guarantees of its future. For true guarantees lay in that Israel's existence should rest on new relationships with the countries of the area, first and foremost.
If you think that the Egyptians had planned that for 4.5 years, this particular attack, and they trained it many times, and they crossed this canal on a make-believe canal, I don't know how many hundreds of times, and they got so much gunpowder, and it had to work. The masses that they threw in, the 100,000 soldiers that crossed the canal within 12 hours. Do you know how many tanks attacked Russia? The Germans had 1,400 tanks. There were 1,400 tanks only in Syria, and there were about 1,200 or 1,300, attacking in Egypt. It was the combined force of both Russia and Germany in the Second World War. And it didn't work out, and they know it.
Is not in becoming stooges to the U.S., but in grasping the spirit of adjustment to the age and to the place. Security, therefore, does not lay in negating the existence of the Palestinian people, who are now living just as you did a period of diaspora. Once again, to ask Israeli youth and the forces of peace and enlightenment in Israel, what are you fighting for? The age of colonialism and expansion is past and gone, and as watchdogs of U.S. interests in the world, there is nothing you can reap except devastation and youth genocide, and another war in the area every few years. So what are you fighting for? From the Hebrew service of Radio Cairo, you have just been listening to For What Purpose Are You Fighting? You are tuned to the Hebrew service of Radio Cairo. And now, ladies and gentlemen, we bring you some songs.
So I criticize, other people criticize, we were a small minority that criticized the government after the 6-Day War, and even before, but especially since the 6-Day War. They said, look, there was a great victory. The Arabs were humiliated, and when you are strong, you can be compassionate and also can be generous. When you're strong, it's a good time to be generous, and one should make then a plan. What Israel is needs for security and for living in peace, and come and suggested it. Of course, a lot of people say, so what, the Arabs want to destroy you, and the Arabs will never accept it, but still, we didn't really go into it. The government was living on sort of a beautiful status quo thing. Not to do anything is better than to do, and in the meantime, they did quite a lot of things that were harmful. In the meantime, the Arabs, of course, were licking the wounds and waiting for a revenge, and the revenge came on Yom Kippurim. People like us, we expected that thing will happen. We didn't expect that the army will not be as ready as it should be. We didn't expect that in the first 2 or 3 days the Arabs will be so, successful, maybe. But I think that the fact that they were so successful is also part of how we deceived ourselves about them, and how we deceived ourselves about our strength and our power and how unbeatable we are. So, of course, at the end it was a victory, and we almost won the war. But now again is a situation in which peace can be achieved, but who will achieve it? I don't know if Golda and Dayan are able now to make the peace that was denied for 6 years. I'm not sure. In a way, I belong to them too, and I understand them, and I understand their fear. We have this pogrom complex here, and you can't take it away from us. For 50 or 60 years, we've been fighting for our lives, so it's not simple. And I remember it in 1948. In 1948, I was wounded, and I haven't been in the first few months of the creation of the state, because Jerusalem was cut off from the rest of the country, and Jerusalem didn't have the Israeli government yet. And so we came to Tel Aviv. It's like Purim, you all dress up, but these people become dressed up like policemen, and this one dress up like prime minister, this one dress up like a captain of the army, and they're all playing a game of being a state, but we've never been before. For years there were British policemen and British government, and we had Ben Gurion with his fire and Golda Meir and all these people, they were newspaper editors and writers and so on. I mean, and all of a sudden, you know, they're masquerading to me. I mean, Ben Gurion is already a prime minister, you know, and
מה ישראל עד השם אלוקינו, עד השם אחד. שמע ישראל עד השם אלוקינו, עד השם אחד. שמע ישראל עד השם אלוקינו, עד השם אחד. שמע ישראל עד השם אלוקינו, עד השם אחד. ישראל עד השם אלוקינו, עד השם אחד. שמע 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 ישראל עד השם אלוקינו, עד השם אחד. ושמע ישראל עד השם אלוקינו, עד השם אחד. שמע ישראל עד השם אלוקינו, עד השם אחד. שמע ישראל עד השם אלוקינו, עד השם אחד.
על הקמת מדינה יהודית בארץ ישראל, היא מדינת ישראל.
ושל נחושת ושל אור, הלא לכל שירייך אני כינור. ירושלים של זהב ושל נחושת ושל אור, הלא לכל שירייך אני כינור. ירושלים של זהב ושל נחושת ושל אור, הלא לכל שירייך אני כינור. ירושלים של זהב ושל נחושת ושל אור, הלא
I had conversations with Arab intellectuals, colleagues of mine, who asked me, why should I be surprised? I mean, it's clear that we're intruders, like the Crusaders at the time. The Crusaders came and managed to stay in this country between 1099 and 1270. The Arabs have patience, but finally they'll get rid of us in the same way that they got rid of the Crusaders at the time. So this state is really just an abscess in the Arab nation, and they have to be cured of it, and therefore every effort is allowed, and they keep trying. The Arabs themselves know in the background that there is in their own history another case, which they're terribly afraid of. They call it the tragedy of Andalus. Andalus is Spain, and what they're afraid of is that if they won't keep attacking and do what they're trying to do, one of these days Israel is going to be like Spain, the lost province, which they can never recover again. So what we want, of course, is to be like Spain and not to be like the Crusaders.
I'm really fighting for the rights of the Palestinians, but I spoke to many Arabs, and I have many good Arab friends, and they look at me and says, look, what are you offering me? You're offering me a tiny little state between Hebron and Shechem? Why? Jaffa is my place, and so it's become very complicated. I mean, even if you want to be a very liberal person, and I want to be, and even if I'm against Golda Meir about her dismiss of the rights of the Palestinians, on this division, Palestine will be as big as Long Island. Is this a state for the most intelligent nation among the Arabs? And the Palestinians are the most intelligent, the most advanced, and the most interesting people in the Arab world. Through the suffering and through the contacts with the Jews and Israel for many, many years, I think they developed something that other Arabs don't have. It's not a coincidence that so many of them want to leave. The whole oil embargo is now handled by Palestinian Arabs. Young, bright Palestinian Arabs who are running the oil business in Saudi Arabia and Kuwait. But they don't accept it. They want all or nothing. The Jews never understood tragedy. This is why the Greeks invented tragedy, and we invent kind of dramas, but never tragedy. I mean, in the Bible, there's no tragedy. Because tragedy is when right is opposed to another right. And here is two rights opposing each other. The Palestinian has the full right for Palestine, and the Jews have the full right to Palestine. I don't know why. Don't ask me why, but they have. Maybe because of Abraham, and maybe because of 100 years of effort, and maybe because, really, where should we go? I mean, 3 million people to Nebraska. It would be nice, but it would be complicated. So there is a right against right. So it's a tragedy. And do you have any solution to a tragedy? No, you don't. It's only possible in Shakespeare, so they all get killed. It works in the theater, it doesn't work in life. There's no solution to a tragedy, and this is a tragic situation here.
אבי, תגיד לו שיפסיק. היי, תפדלו כולכם.
Jewish communities in the diaspora in Europe tended to have the same outlook. Before 1939, they would say it is impossible to imagine that people will be killed. At most, they will be chased away somewhere. They'll be exiled. I mean, the Germans will put in more of these limitations and restrictions on their life, but nobody could think of the final solution. In that sense, to me, it is very clear that the Arabs do think of a final solution. I mean, there is a final solution of Israel. This is called generally the rights of the Palestinian people. That's the elegant, modern way of presenting it. You have an Arab statesman telling you he is ready to.
So I don't think I sent a bunch of messages earlier on, just before I sent the stream. So modern about jumping on the fucking bandwagon. Empire Files. Oh, okay. Let's go to Empire Files, the channel first. Ah, fuck it. Popular upload. May as well. So let's get red pilled, hey?
In a country that declared the end to socialism, a major poll released in January of 2016 revealed something unexpected. 43% of people under 30 in the US view socialism favorably, compared to only 32% who view capitalism favorably. This shows that despite a concerted effort to smother the ideas of a man who died 133 years ago this March, the analysis put forward by Karl Marx remains extremely relevant today. Marx is considered the most influential philosopher to ever live.
Fuck off.
With his co-thinker Friedrich Engels, they developed a way of understanding the world that has not only greatly contributed to the understanding of philosophy and economics, but also history, anthropology, political science, biology, and many other fields. As a young man in the mid-19th century, Marx embedded himself in the workers' movements in his home country of Germany, then in France, from where he was exiled to London for his political activity. In addition to dedicating himself to scientific study of capitalism and social change, Marx was also an organizer and convened the very first international organization of socialists with the goal of overthrowing capitalism, known as the Communist League, whose slogan was "Working men of all countries unite." His work Capital is regarded as the premier dissection of the economic system we live under. His discovery of dialectical materialism redefined the world of philosophy, and his rallying call, the Communist Manifesto, is considered the most influential political document in the world. As the US empire thrashes to survive the current global capitalist crisis, and with rejection of capitalism clearly growing among young people, I wanted to find out what it was about Marx's work that has had such a profound impact from peasants in Asia to miners in Africa to workers in the US alike. So I talked to someone who's been teaching students and the public about Marxism for years, Dr. Richard Wolff, professor of economics emeritus at the University of Massachusetts, Amherst. You're a Marxist economist. Let's start from the basics. What is Marxism, and what does it mean to have a Marxist lens with which to view the world?
I think the best way to understand it is that the difference between Marxism and other things is that it wants to go to the root. It is radical in that sense. It wants to see these problems, homelessness, inequality, an economy that bounces around, having a recession or a depression every 3 to 7 years, a society that concentrates political power in a tiny number. These recurring problems of capitalism, Marxism says, are built into the system. And if you want to solve them, you can't do that within the framework of the system. You have to face the fact that the system itself is the problem, which is why Marxists tend to be people who abide by the idea we can and we should do better than capitalism. We should reorganize society because that will be a better way to deal with all those problems than dealing with them individually as if you could solve homelessness or solve inequality by a quick fix, by a marginal adjustment. No, the problems are systemic. So you have to understand how capitalism as a system works in order to begin to work your way to a solution.
Could you give a brief explanation of dialectical materialism?
Marx was a philosopher, so being a rigorous and systematic thinker, he didn't want to jump into economics, which is what he focused on, without grounding it in philosophy. So he begins as a student of Hegel, the great philosopher. When he begins his academic life, Marx began as a professor. He taught philosophy. His doctoral dissertation was on ancient Greek philosophy. He wasn't an economist when he began. He ended up thinking he had to study economics because of how philosophy got him there. And to be quick in a way of an answer to your question, he comes out of a school of thought that believed that ideas were the supreme achievement of human beings.
Yeah, me too. I agree on
Ideas
that.
are what you get from the most refined reflection that the human brain can do. If you're religiously oriented, ideas are what you get from God, from the spiritual realm. And so the world is really shaped by something prior to the world, namely ideas. So the notion is, sometimes called idealism, that the real world is the product of ideas. There was nothing. And there was first God, which is a non-material idea, and that creates the world. Remember, in Genesis, 7 days, God, a spirituality, creates the materiality of the world. Marx rejected that. For him, the material is just as important as the ideal. If you want to see where the material comes from, it's shaped by ideas. But, and here comes his radicalism, it runs the other way too. The ideas don't come from nowhere. They come out of the real world. The ideas we have as people have to do with the real material problems we have as human beings and how we solve them. Where do we get our food? Where do we get our shelter? How do we get protection as little children from the elements, from our parents? All of these real material matters of life and survival are shaping our ideas every bit as much as our ideas shape the reality. Dialectical materialism is the name for a point of view that says, if you want to understand the world, you need to look at how ideas shape the material, but the other way too, and the two have interact. That's the way to see the world. And for that reason, when it came to explaining the problems of capitalism, he never could and never did suggest it's all because of the ideas of people about capitalism. It's the real way human beings make their food, solve their clothing problems, relationship problems that shape their ideas as much. And he was going to analyze capitalism through that lens of the interaction of ideas and concrete material reality back and forth.
Marxists take a particular view of history called historical materialism. How is the current area of capitalism fit into the long history? I think you've mentioned this before, just how this is just the latest chapter in a long history of economic development.
The basic idea is that every economic system has in it conflicting forces. The language in Marxism is internal contradictions. The system has in it problems it is constantly struggling with because they're built into the system. And for long periods of time, it finds solutions. But in the end, historical materialism says the internal contradictions become unmanageable, and then there's a kind of explosion, the system dies, and a new one is born. So we had slavery, for example, in various parts of the world. It was born, it evolved, it had its contradictions. For example, the contradiction that the only way a slave system can continue is if you replace the slaves that reach old age and die, and that's become a big problem for many slave societies. And so eventually, the slavery couldn't solve its problems, and it died, replaced by feudalism in Europe, which went through the parallel process, and then it blew up. It couldn't solve its problems. So historical materialism begins to look at capitalism through the same lens. What are the internal contradictions? How do they bedevil the system? What solutions for a while have they found? But when and where might we get to a level of internal contradiction that makes the system tremble, makes it vulnerable? And at that point, if revolutionaries can see and understand what's going on, they can intervene to move to the next system, to get beyond this. Just like rebels overthrew slavery, rebels overthrew feudalism, the expectation of Marx was that capitalism would generate the contradictions, then the tensions, then the failed solutions that would then bring into being the rebels with the ideas of criticism, Marx himself being one of those, who would eventually move to the next system. To illustrate it as concretely as I can, let me give you an example of the kind of contradiction Marx found in capitalism that has been crucial for everybody else. And I pick it because it's so relevant right now in the United States and around the world. Every capitalist, I think most of the folks watching know this just from their personal life, every capitalist is always trying to either make more money or survive competitively by saving on his labor costs. One capitalist does it by substituting machines for working people, automating, getting a computer to do what he used to have 50 people do, et cetera, et cetera. Another capitalist does it by trying to get cheaper workers in place of more expensive ones, hiring women, if they're less expensive, to do the job that they used to pay men more for, hiring immigrants rather than native folks, moving to another part of the world where wages are much lower. We all know that. So capitalists are always trying to save on labor costs because they can make a better profit if they do that. But here comes the contradiction. If all capitalists are reducing the number of workers they pay or reducing the pay they give to their workers, what will result is that the working people have less and less money. And if they have less and less money, they can't buy what the capitalists are producing to sell. The capitalists, therefore, are destroying themselves, but they have no choice. They have to save on the labor outlay, and then that comes back and bites them in the rear end because there's no demand. If you've been so successful becoming rich as a capitalist, you've killed yourself. These kinds of contradictions for Marx are the beginning of the end of a system. It papers it over. For example, when people couldn't buy in the 1970s, the capitalist system kept going anyway. How did it do that? How did it keep going when the people didn't have enough money from their wages to buy? The solution was credit. We loaded the world up. House credit, that's your mortgage. Car payment credit, nobody buys a car except by paying out. Credit cards, which didn't exist before the 1970s for anything but traveling businessmen, and only a small number of them. And then when that was not enough, we loaded up, for the first time in American history, an entire generation of students who can't get a degree without loading up with tens of thousands of dollars of debt. We kept the system going. People could buy stuff even though their wages didn't pay for it by borrowing. And in 2008, the predictable happened. It turned out your fix only lasts for a while. You really have to ask, in a way that many of us as Marxists haven't done for most of our lives. The problems of capitalism now are so severe, so systemic, so global, that we're beginning to wonder whether this system is going to find a way out. The Marxists are not the only ones wondering whether this system is coming to an end. The people on the other side of the political fence are very worried too.
Yeah, you have billionaires writing op-eds. The
Absolutely.
pitchforks are coming for the plutocrats because they know what's coming. Let's talk about the bubbles. You're talking about the housing bubble, and I think that this is a really interesting indication. the housing crisis, you know, the crisis of overproduction, the fact that we have more houses than we do homeless people. But because you had this crisis of overproduction, too much of something was produced and people couldn't utilize it. I mean, talk about that concept and why this is an inescapable phenomenon under capitalism.
Starting in the 1970s, American businesses began to have what I like to call a eureka moment. They realized that in the West, North America, Western Europe, and Japan, 100 and 200 years of capitalism had built up impressive factories, offices, stores. But they were built up in the places where capitalism was born, Western Europe, North America, and Japan. That's where they had concentrated everything. And that's where they had drawn workers in off the countryside to become urban, industrialized working classes. And along the way, the workers, noticing how productive capitalism was since they did the work, demanded for themselves a rising standard of living. So roughly, from 1820 to 1970, particularly in the United States, but elsewhere, wages rose. That's what, over that time, capitalists were doing so well, they could raise the wages of their workers and still make out like bandits. So it was a system in which people began to get the idea capitalism works. It delivers the goods because it raises wages. You had to not look at what was happening to where most people in the world lived, Asia, Africa, Latin America, because for them the situation was horrible. But if you concentrated on where capitalism was born, you could fool yourself into thinking, wow, this is a system that works. And the capitalists, of course, and the people who liked it celebrated all of that. Then in the 1970s, capitalists had this eureka moment. They said to themselves, wait a minute, we're in North America, Western Europe, and Japan, where the wages are now very high. Workers are very happy. But why are we here? In the rest of the world, which has been savaged by the growth of capitalism in those privileged areas, wages are very low. So in this eureka moment, capitalists said, what are we doing here in the Western Europe, North America, and Japan? It's much more profitable if we produce in China, in India, in Brazil, anywhere else. And there begins what we're still in the middle of, the exodus, the abandonment.
Have you noticed he hasn't pointed out education, thinking, etc., etc., etc.? But he's got a point though in Karl Marx, like the simulation is kind of like, okay, the postmodern thinking as well. What will mind do for later on? You know what I'm saying? So that makes sense. So thinking for yourself. Come on.
Abandonment of the places of origin of capitalism by the capitalists. So there's a massive move to China, India, Brazil, and all those places, producing what? Well, what every capitalist wants, which is to make a bundle. So they build big factories, imagining that they can sell all of this stuff like they used to. But they forgot something. If you go from high wages in the United States to low wages in China, the bottom line is that the people earning wages are earning a lot less than they used to. It's not just that they're not Americans, they're Chinese, but they can't buy back what you're building. They can't manage to consume what you have the capacity to produce. Right now, China is slowing down, scaring the whole world. But it's not China that's slowing down. It's the inability of China to sell to the world because the wages of the world's workers have been depressed now for years as we move out of Western Europe, North America, and Japan into these lower. And the system totters as it encounters a very old contradiction in its current form for which they have no solution. And right now, when it's happening on a global scale, Europe is having it, North America is having it, Japan. These are the centers of capitalism. They're in the most trouble right now, and they don't see a way out, and I don't either, which makes it possible, for the first time in my life, to begin to see a capitalism that is in fundamental shaking difficulty. And if I were to explain to someone why you get bizarre politics, unlike what we've had for a century,
Often this comes, how to put it, after a bit of life experience as well. So, generally, what people do internally is kind of like what's inside of them, then branch off as well. So, another side note for original thinking as well, or individual philosophy. So, if that makes sense. So, and it's also the economic outlook. Like, how can I be free to do right without causing? Say this is my baseline here. How can I do? I have that moment of clarity or whatever that you want, divine intervention, whatever you call it. How can I be fundamentally safe and to go off without crashing? So
it's because of this. And here in the United States, you see the kind of theatrical buffoonery, but there's more to it. Why is Trump such a character in the Republican? Why is that party literally tearing itself apart? Because it can't cope. And even the Democratic Party suddenly confronted with a socialist who isn't marginalized simply because he gives himself the name socialist. In fact, it makes him attractive. What Bernie Sanders is proving is that the interest in socialism has captured millions of Americans.
I think that people are starting to understand this, and they're looking at things like the defense industry, and they're saying, we need an enemy. We need to manufacture this enemy to keep the war machine going since Eisenhower. But it seems like a lot of more libertarian-minded people are saying it's just cronyism, right? Yes, we live in an empire. Yes, we need this constant enemy, but it's really just the crony aspect of capitalism, and we just need to restore capitalism. You obviously go much deeper. How is all of this, especially the empire that we live in, directly related to capitalism?
Every time a system's in trouble, there are the defenders of the system who say, well, yes, I agree, right now it's really crappy, it's dangerous, it doesn't work. But that's because something has come in to destroy the really pure capitalism. If only we had that, it would work beautifully. I understand it. That's a human, you want to hold on because changing systems is frankly scary, always has been. So this is a way you can hold on to a kind of loyalty to capitalism in general while joining in the critique of the way capitalism is here. The answer I give, which will make these folks unhappy, is, look, capitalism is what you got. And if you don't like the way it's evolved, that's very nice. But imagining that you can go back to something pure that won't then repeat the same evolution to what we have, kind of begs the question, how come? We didn't become dependent on the defense industries because a lot of people are crooks or because a lot of people have cronies whom they favor. Come on, that's not really a very profound analysis. There may be cronies all the time, but why were they successful?
I think the biggest counter, and I'm sure you hear this constantly, is looking at the USSR, looking at some sort of manifestation of authoritarianism like North Korea and saying, well, that's the inevitability of communism.
When capitalism emerges in Europe out of feudalism, 17th, 18th century, there are lots of places where it is started, where it grows for a while, and then it blows up, it dies, or it goes in directions that are horrible and people reject it.
Really?
And that's not surprising because you don't one day decide to go from system A to system B, set up the new system B, and everything just works ducky fine off the bat. That's not how this happens.
That's one reason I think absolute truths can be evil. If truth reaches its limit, maximum potential, whatever maturity, it exhausts. So
every case, the transition has to go through a number of experiments. Lessons are learned. This we did well, that we didn't do well, and that's why it fell apart or took a direction we didn't like. And then eventually you get to a capitalism which covers its bets, can be better than the ones that came earlier, lasts longer, and becomes something that all people eventually grasp onto. I would expect that of socialism. Look, for most of the world, poverty is the daily grind of life.
Yep.
And therefore, the most urgent economic objective of most people in most parts of the world is to get out of poverty, to have economic growth where the standard of living grows. Okay, in the last 300 years, the two examples of large societies that have grown the fastest are the Soviet Union and the People's Republic of China. And just to remind everyone, in 19 1917, when the Russian Revolution happens,
You're right,
Russia
so-
is the most backward country in Europe. The vast
Poverty too. It's also poverty of everything. When you're that destitute, you kind of can't do much. Hence why I think education is so important. So you can make use or intelligence. What do you want to say? To make use of what you've got access to, etc., etc., and the importance of your local community as well, which I always push to. The quality of your local community that you're born into. Which will make it easier. So, which I do, yeah. Look, guys, I'm really fucking tired at the moment, so hopefully this can attract people to come on my live streams to talk to, so which is what I want. So, but let's find some what do you call it? See, Porsche, and it's what she says. See what YouTube brings up. Which is shit that I've already seen. Streamed 3 months ago. Not a fan of Roller Tonight Show, no. But anyway, let's see. She apparently debunked it. So
That's a Chromebook with the Everything button, so you can find things instantly, from files to apps, even answers online. Who says you can't have everything with one little button? Switch to finding things instantly. Switch to Chromebook.
Okay. Okay.
I was in the back of her head, she a mess. I wasn't back if I'm making stress. I wasn't back if I'm making it wet. I wasn't back if I'm making a mess. For that little thing will be.
So
Cállate la boca. Lay down. Good night.
Bathing shit.
Good night. Dogs. Okay. In today's episode, we're going to finish the I debunked the manosphere. I don't know what's more fucking cringe. That or president of the manosphere. And it begins. I look horrible. I also pulled, per usual, one of Rollo's essays. It's probably one of my favorite ones.
She needs to expand her academic source besides Roller Tomato, which there's something about that dude just weirds me out. So
If you guys are familiar with it. Am I overexposed? It looks like it up. I can't tell.
no, but it's Uladin.
I feel like I'm really short. Hey.
You're short like me.
Anyway, so I did a overdub for it, but I couldn't download an audiogram. Okay. So it's just audio. It's not like you can read the words. There's some awkward tonalities in it. I'm not gonna lie. Laughed at what seems like weird moments. The wrong moments. No, I just couldn't say the word that came before it, so I cut it out. Okay. Cállate la boca. Lay down.
If you want to know about dating, she's got a good point. Pick a bartender to bring in dating as well. So
F cow dog. Okay. I'm gonna do the essay when I think it's appropriate. We're gonna go right into her video first. Okay, lay down. Okay, lay down. Is it this one? No, it's this one.
This video is sponsored by...
Hold up. Okay, I don't know exactly where we left off, but I'm just gonna fucking cut to the middle. Yeah. I think it was the false allegations of Grupa Dupa. That means fat butt in Polish, but it's fine. I'm fine. Okay. I won't say it. She looks like a nematode. Okay, we're going.
knowing they're a victim of R or SA, and even willing to add...
It's always good to get variations of theories and shit like that. So, okay, all the time. So, I know Torsia, which is the girl's YouTube channel that I'm on. May as well link her up and shit, which I won't do. But see what I can get out of it. So, but let's do it. Share. But you know, life goes on. So I can't believe how tired I am. Which I can't offer much. They're incredibly boring. Let's see what she said. I'm just fixing up two things up. I'll be. Let's see what it says. Change your side. See what happens. Okay. Let's play the. Now I don't know who this Russian girl looking is. So see what she
admit to themselves or others that they're a victim of R or SA, especially if it was perpetrated by a close friend or intimate partner, which is most cases. The CDC used trained staff to carry out the NISVS. This survey only asks respondents about R and SA, no other victimizations. They also did not use the words R or SA in their questions, but described a...
We're all victims of something, okay? All of us. That's not like a whatever thing. Oh shit, I completely forgot about something at the moment. So, but we're all victims of something, trust me. But, you know, oh shit, hang on. Lost the sub. Oops. Okay, anyway, that's it. So anyway, it's pretty much what the idea, like, you know, I kind of agree with Karl Marx on that. Everyone starts from a point, you know. And I think the German philosopher Hannah Arendt, completely fucked the name, where, you know, she proposed that we live in a consequential world. This is all a result of somebody's ideas and stuff. So anyway, and we all got to work in the framework. So let's have
events to the respondents whilst reminding them that the event, if it happened, is not their fault. They didn't even make the respondents say yes because that can trigger trauma. So instead they asked how many people have ever made you and listed certain acts so that the person could just say a number. The Bureau of Justice and Statistics used the NCVS to find the 1 in 52 number. So this is a generic crime victimization survey. The staff were not trained on how to speak to people about R and SA. Respondents of this crime survey had a screening question jumped on them about R and SA in the middle of...
I mean, this is like just getting ridiculous. Absolutely. Like, does nobody know what grape is? Don't come at me and say it's trauma. Like, seriously. Did someone hit you with a car? Yes or no?
Not yet.
The fact that there's wishy-washy instances, like, we suck as a society. We really do.
Other questions which asked whether they'd had their car broken into or their house broken into or been mugged. These screening questions also used the words R and SA, and if the respondent said no, then no further questions were asked.
How about the fact that if they say yes, that constitutes as rape, robbing a car?
Furthermore, an entire report was written by a board of experts to explain a ton of...
Okay. Loci. Sorry. Okay. Okay, like, what does this tell me? This is just your source.
Fact.
I'm being bitchy. Maybe it'll pop up.
In the NCVS, which also lead to the...
Good shit. Okay. The cost efficiency of introducing disproportionate stratified sampling of those at higher risk for rape and sexual assault victimization. The cost efficiency of supplementing the standard area house. Like,
I think too, before she continues, is what's the prison theory? Like or can't no not that. Oh my god. Making it easy to put people in prison. Now if you look in the 90s of the drug wars, now, I've always got a theory that with the rise of hippies in the 60s, and they did that have that free sort of society, the freedom of free society idea out of the system. So I reckon the CIA and the crack cocaine thing came in the 80s, the 90s came with the drug wars to make it easier for people to get put in prison. But whatever that prison conspiracy theory is, I reckon this is another version of Bliss coming into play for more modern times. With the rise of post-Marxist theories and stuff, because the wrong kind of individuality is coming along. I've got no complaints about it, but you know what I mean. So it's another formation of reforming the black, where people put in prison, and then you do 10 cents an hour job. So cool.
can someone explain to me what's going on? Seriously. Bless you. Dog. She's like sneezing away from this bowl.
And humanity relies on people reproducing, so hence why sex is so important too.
Bullshit right now. You got it. Get up there, baby.
Reporting of R and SA. These surveys also probably both still underreported because they only contacted...
Okay, well, I bet you they're underreported because why don't we count men in prison? We gonna talk about that? I think there's...
Okay, in the USA, I think because of the high prison population, particularly with men or males, whatever you want to call them, there's a lot more rape happening too. So check that out.
Probably more men in prison being raped. I used the hard R. Damn it.
I just said that.
Than women across the U.S. I will put my money on it.
household numbers, whilst not including
Cállate la
places
boca.
such as military bases, healthcare facilities, or domestic violence shelters. And it's also very unlikely that someone currently living with an abusive partner.
And it, ladies, if you've got a son, particularly child age, check out women's shelters policies as well. I mean, in terms of kids and shit. So, but you know,
Would sit there.
Hold on, my dog's deaf. Yet I still yell at her. Okay, lay down. Lay down. I know there's one mosquito. It's fine.
The phone taking a survey about their abuse.
But you want to know why you want to know why women continue to falsely accuse men of rape? Because they're not being prosecuted.
alright. This bloke here, I'm not a big fan of him either, okay, guys, but
In order to keep all men and employers fearful of false accusations of
Lokai, you got it. Lokai, you can get on the bed. Yeah. You have to deal with your consequences. You want to dig through the garbage and get fat? That's your own fault. You will be forever alone. I hate my life. I really do. Lokai! Hold on.
rape, domestic violence.
We cannot believe the victims as soon as they come out, because sadly, that's what these women do. They falsely accuse people of rape, and then when you call them out, they get mad at you. And a few days later, they say, yeah, it was for clout.
You know, you can't completely dismiss this very real fear that men have.
which is true, okay, girls, so remember, consequences to all actions and inactions, so
That some evil woman could
respect to this guy's beard, but I reckon his haircut needs to be better.
come along and just ruin their life with a
In this
story.
whole era of the Me Too movement, I think that we've done a huge disservice to everybody, assuming that anytime anybody's accused of anything, that it must be true.
There is currently no evidence that any women anywhere are getting any sort of benefits from accusing men of R or SA.
I can name one. Money. What are you talking about?
Which is true, so, look into the phones or emails of famous people, okay? I'm not going to point out celebrities or sports, but look in their phones. Look at their DMs, look in their emails. Trust me, the thought of somebody better coming along in terms of a dating spectrum, they never leaves them. So, let's have a look at it.
Listen, in research literature, a woman's form of aggression, we've talked about this many times, but I'm going to keep bringing it up. Men beat men up, right? They're ones that will assault each other physically. The female equivalent is to...
Which is true. If you're a stats person, go to criminal stats things.
ruin their reputation, and what better way than to make sure nobody ever wants to fuck him again. I don't know if I'm saying on the basis of false accusations, okay? Not for real victims, but don't fucking tell me that there's no instance that they're benefiting from it. Even if let's say it was actual rape, not a false allegation, because I think I just stumbled over it. There's still a monetary gain. Otherwise, why do it? Oh yeah, because if he is a rapist, he should go to jail. so he doesn't harm other women. It's always so interesting to me because a lot of women that don't self-report, no one will believe me. I genuinely don't believe a lot of women. I really don't. Sorry. And the fact that, like,
I didn't know she was going to say that. In fact, she said it.
it's almost like they know that they can't prove it. Sorry. This whole we can withdraw consent at any time, make it make sense. Okay? I swear to Lord.
Whether it was false or not, what they're more often getting is harassment and setbacks in their careers.
Okay. Study finds 75% of workplace harassment victims experienced retaliation when they spoke up. Yeah, that's common regardless. Yeah, it's usually a higher up. Yeah, here's a little tip for my queens. You don't go to HR. You go to the cops. But something tells me it still has to deal with that aggression and that trying to ruin their reputation, which is why they do it at work. Make it make sense. HR isn't there to help you. They're not there to help any of the employees. They protect higher ups, assuming that that's who the majority you guys be talking about. I'll be honest with you. I think every single fucking career deals with retaliation. We're tribal. We form groups. If anybody's tribal, it's the left.
That's true.
Yeah, retaliation's really common. And was this a thing when it was male dominated? Probably not. Probably not. I think maybe there was like hostile work environment to get the guy out of there if you really thought he was like a horrible human being. But even then, I don't think men would do that. Yeah.
Especially when it's a powerful man being accused. But how many of these accusations?
What about the guys that are very powerful in the workplace that like do not allow women to get in the elevator with them? That says something.
Are false. Well, Rollo and other manosphere influencers like to insinuate that these sneaky females are doing it all the time.
Sneaky females. Yeah, we're the more manipulative sex. I'm in it too. I'm not off the hook, you know? I don't even think women know that. I think, remember how I said 26 things I learned my birthday post last year? I talked about it.
Okay, so now I'm paying attention. This podcast here, Fresh and Fit, fucking wankers, mate. The douchebags, so I don't support them at all. Fuck those people. Ever and preach for life, okay?
One of the things that I said was, fuck, where was I going? Oh, give me a moment. What did I say? Never tell somebody, like when it comes to, like, let's say somebody upset you, you're responsible for your feelings. Nobody else is. So when you say things, and I know I'm going to catch some flack in the manosphere because I know guys will tell guys, you know, she's going to say this, just try to understand her. No, I think this is fucking manipulation. It says, I don't like that you did this because it made me feel this way. Call me a psychopath.
Thing is this, is that the definition basically says that
That's a Chromebook with built-in virus protection, so you can click with confidence, with no more of this, and a lot more peace of mind. Leave along viruses. Switch to built-in virus protection. Switch to Chromebook.
But you know, you gotta, okay, this guy, Rollo Tomasi, whatever his name is, he's good, he does have some valid points, but it's still not a fan of him. See what happens.
that any allegation of can only be classified as a false allegation if it has been determined after a thorough investigation that a crime did not occur. It's basically trying to prove the negative.
I hate when they give me a straw that's too small for my drink.
So just
fucking
Sports capitalism.
Mooncat.
Because those fraudulent ones were the ones that they could record according to the definition of what it is, does not mean that 98 to 98% are true, but that is exactly what a prosecutor.
I hope you guys understand that. It's really confusing when it comes to talking about false negatives or whatever in court. Like, how do you do it? Like the Casey Anthony trial. Wasn't that? I don't know.
Attorney will try to convince a jury.
It is true that we'll never accurately know, but there.
I hate when people do that.
That's often true. I volunteered at some places as well, and a lot of the times too, it's legal consequences going through the legal process, and money to it, time away, as well. So you got to take that into account as well. And of course, if the individual involved, the victim has mental illness too as well. So
When you don't have a formal comeback rebuttal, it's like you try to find common ground on something so you can move forward onto the next topic. I see your mental gymnastics and I don't fall for it.
An estimate of between 2 and 10%. And if it could be as many as 1 in 10, that could be a problem.
You know what's a problem? Mooncat. You want to know what's a problem? Sending innocent people to jail. Yeah. Even just one.
I still think it's that prison conspiracy shit too. But unlike in the 90s, I don't think they have a lot of substance for it. But maybe in the low minimum security prisons, but see what happens.
2 to 8%. Doesn't matter the amount.
Okay, so let's learn about false R allegations. To best determine whether an R...
You just said 5 seconds ago that we would never know. Want to explain? When I say things like that, guys, that means that this is what's probably going to come after this is an attempt to strengthen their argument based off of things that could be true, but we could never test for.
Which is true. In the court of law, a lot of it's practical as well, in terms of the evidence and how to determine stuff as well. So, which is actually pretty. There's some other countries do practice outside guilty and innocent. I think Ireland does it, but I can't. You should look up Google the terminology for it. But the speculation part, where it's kind of like it's true, but you can't physically prove it. So.
False. Police look at the nature of the allegation based on previous investigations where R's have been.
Okay, when we do one, we are checking for the dates. I've been checking the dates. Anything 10 years, like it has to be 10 years. Okay, I don't believe anything else. That's what my teacher said. There is a mosquito. Okay, violence against women. Let's call the number. Shall we?
You do that. Do it.
Sitting on my phone. Is this like a different number? Why is there so many numbers?
She actually didn't call him, so I hope she does.
Okay, one of the most controversial disputes affecting the discourse related to violence against women is the dispute about the frequency of false allegations. If you guys knew how many women will retract a statement from the cops, not because she's scared of her boyfriend, and even if that was the case, Again, you put other women at harm. Remember that trolley episode I did?
What?
Proven to be false, or the accuser has
sexual assault reported to a major northeastern university over a 10-year period are analyzed. How can you do that if you change the definition every year?
That's true. Yeah,
that's going to make numbers go up significantly. What if you?
The thing is, that's a good point. The usage of language as well. Again, if you go into the philosophy of language, is meaning or sensations attached to a specific word. If you put it all together, it has the sentence or paragraph has meaning to it. But if you change the definition, the use of language, again, you change the definition. Change the definition of stuff. Will affect practicality as well. So she's got a good point there.
Took things out that you don't believe went with the definition at the time. Does it start?
And the fall of intersexuality to our post-Marxist thinking is the idea of self-identifying. So, soon, I wish I could live there last year. So.
Okay, I have questions.
Retracted the allegation. Looking at these cases, the most common.
Why would women retract a statement?
Yes, that's what I want to know too.
Sorry, I was lying. People retract statements when it comes to police investigations.
A lot of the times a guy can't be stopped.
When they're lying.
Why would they lie though? Why go to that extent though?
Occurrence is a minor who has skipped school or missed a curfew, and to avoid punishment, they say that they've been assaulted.
Yeah, that's exactly.
It's always so funny to me. I'm just like on a roll. There's this thing that people do when it comes to arguments, and when they know they're losing one, they bring in the kid. It happens all the time. You will never unsee it. Seriously. Because there's something we all agree on as a nation, and that is things done to kids is harmful. But even just using the word kids will shift somebody's paradigm.
Yeah, that's true.
Mental gymnastics.
The vast majority.
Unfortunately, no, I shouldn't be starting that thing. Guys do learn a lot from personal experience as well. Unfortunately, too, sometimes it's a bit too late. In terms of how they look at a woman's beauty, for example, it doesn't become kind of aligned until they have daughters. A lot of my guy friends that I know have quit porn, have quit, you know what I mean, thinking, and etc., when they have their first daughter. So, and generally too, that you don't think about dangers and pedophiles and all that shit until you actually have children. So.
Of these cases, the parent will file the report on behalf of the child. And when the child comes into the police station, it becomes clear that this was not a real event, as they will not name or describe the perpetrator or the event. Other common motivations include people attempting to cover up unfaithfulness to their partner, anger or revenge, attention or sympathy. In these
attention or sympathy.
How's this? I debunked the manosphere with the title of Torsh's video. What the fuck? This is just talking about rape and legalities and crime and. Okay. Well, I'm still new to this manosphere thing, so let's continue watching. So.
They remember.
But honestly, respect for bringing up data and stats like this, which I don't know if they're true or not. But the effort of bringing this sort of stuff into YouTube videos is to be admired.
Remember that. Who does that? I know you guys were thinking women, but let's be specific.
That's true.
Who has a tendency to...
Character.
over exaggerate or make up lies. Somebody that's maybe unwell, mentally ill, keep that in mind.
Cases when the allegation has served its purpose, it is normally retracted or dropped. Another large portion of them come from mentally ill people. These people will also
This is when people, have you ever been in a heated argument casually or not even an argument, but you're just talking about how you were so late to work, somebody cut you off, and you forgot this at home. And then you always add something else that was like, was it necessary? Probably not. She just did that. She wanted to make it sound like there's what constitutes as mentally ill? Because there's a difference between competency capacity and it's competency in terms of law, capacity in terms of the hospital. But what else? Gravely disabled, unable to make your own decisions, probably have a power of attorney. What constitutes as mentally ill? Has a mental illness?
That's true. That does happen. The guardian thing of legalities. It's just a common practice, actually. You know, set your paralyzed when they're down or severely mentally handicapped. There's somebody normally within your family can make legal choices for you.
It's always interesting to me, and I don't know if this is just like overseas, but we don't use mentally ill in the US. I don't know if you guys were very conscientious or like conscious of that. We don't like illness because it puts people who are seeking treatment that aren't necessarily ill under a stigmatizing word. So people who suffer from mental health conditions is what you would hear. I don't know if she chose the word mentally ill to make it seem more on the extreme end, but it's really not that extreme.
very likely describe
It's just the word.
A violent attack, the type of R that we know is not actually that common.
None of this is apparently that common, is it? So you can't pull a study from 1966.
And our allegation is
irrelevant. What do they call that in court? This didn't make it into evidence. I'm sorry. It's too outdated. It's too outdated.
Likely to be false if the victim describes a situation that involves someone that they know, an intimate
And that study was taken in the 60s. And what did I say about hippies?
partner or a friend as the perpetrator, and the issue of consent could be construed as a grey.
I find it interesting that
you do have to constitute capacity of the adult skills. And I do believe in consent education as well. But it's also the process to make adult mature decision making. So
sexual assault happens amongst people that know each other the most.
That's true.
Unpopular opinion. Yeah. Just really don't give a fuck anymore. There's something to say about that. There is a difference between rape and regret sex. Even if he turned out to be a thief after the fact. Now, in some areas, coercion is a form of assault, which is astonishing to me. But
area. But of course, We don't know. Some of the allegations counted as true could be false, but just as much, some of the allegations counted as false could be true. But this doesn't mean that
Mental
police
gymnastics.
are throwing men in jail based on the assumption that
It's not really the going to jail part. It's really not that. It's ruining the reputation. It is more harmful than getting socked in the fucking face, dude. Look it up. I can pull up studies after, remind me.
allegation is true based on the nature of it. You still have to prove it beyond reasonable doubt, which for R is incredibly difficult. Out of 206.
What kind of person makes false? Just like early 2000s. Nope, still irrelevant.
Complaints that were classified as false.
Sorry.
Only 120.
I want updated citations. I feel like my old professor.
6 had even gotten to the stage where the accuser lodged a formal complaint.
Okay, guys, I want to call it quits. It's about just over 3 hours. I know it's not much of a live stream, but slowly trying to get into the habit of doing it. So I'm trying to run kind of streams I'm doing. So I hope to get better and bring more interesting content